we oftentimes don't want people to, especially in leadership roles, to recognize that we're actually afraid right now.
Yeah.
There's some really challenging things, and I'm trying to be the calm in the storm, but inside it's churning up and I am afraid for everything. As we went along the journey, I started to say to Joel, I don't know how much gas I have left in my tank to do this and do it with you. We really need somebody who can, I felt we needed somebody who could run the company. Joel felt differently, but he was open to it because he knew how much pain I was in. I just knew inside that we weren't going to take the company to the company's vision. We just weren't going to. And so that helped that experience in meditation and this practice I have really helped bring out that intuition more strongly.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Freedom Experience. I'm your host, Jean Moncrief. In this episode, I have a very special guest. Rob Dube is a speaker, he's an author, he's an entrepreneur, but most of all, he's a good friend. And Rob and I met many years ago through the Small Giants community, and we were both part of a passport group of 8 to 10 entrepreneurs who once a quarter met to go behind the scenes of some very special businesses. Companies like Zingerman's and Beryl Health and Cliff Bar. And we had the opportunity to peel back the curtains and take a look what was making those companies so successful, how we could apply that in our own businesses, and how we could learn from one another. Now, back then, and still today, Rob was a runner, a vegan, he meditated daily, things that we looked at curious with a degree of curiosity back then, but today many of us are looking to build some of those practices into our own lives. So I thought it would be great to get him on the show and have a conversation about finding your true self. Rob's entrepreneurial journey began way back at school, where he and Joel, his best mate, were selling blow pops from their locker, and they went on to found a company called imageOne together, which is actually mentioned in the book Traction by Gino Wickman. imageOne was one of the first adopters of the entrepreneurial operating system. And he recommended to me that I use it in my own business when I was trying to deal with a lot of those kind of challenges that you do face when you're trying to grow a business. So over the years, imageOne did phenomenally well. The business was actually sold at one point, and then Rob and Joel ended up taking the business back. imageOne has also received numerous accolades from the Forbes Small Giant community as America's best small companies, Inc. magazine, best place to work, and the number one place to work in Michigan. Rob wrote the book Do Nothing, which helped me figure out my own meditation practice and follow that path. But most recently, he's co-authored Shine with Gino Wickman. And in the book, Rob and Gino tackle how looking inward is the key to finding true entrepreneurial freedom and to uncovering our own true selves. So in our conversation, we discussed the power of 10-year thinking and how that 10-year business cycle, when you're looking out 10 years down the line and you're thinking in those chunks, you can actually slow down time and build a really good business. It gives you opportunity to find clarity and to build that great company that you're looking to build. We also dive into this idea of a messy path to get where you want to go over those 10 years and how that is, in fact, a very beautiful path. And that we're all exactly where we need to be right now on the path. And right now, you're exactly where you need to be listening to this podcast. So how that journey shapes who we are today. Rob shares the 10 disciplines that he's written about in the book Shine and how they can help you to reconnect to your true self and to lead with intention. I hope that you enjoy this conversation with Rob as much as I did. Rob, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for coming on and joining us today.
I'm so happy to see you. So happy to see you, my old friend. not literally old, like friends for a long time is what I mean.
Yeah, it's like we were saying before, it's been, 13 odd years. And it was back from those passport events at Small Giants where we got to spend so much
Yeah.
valuable time together. And
Yeah.
yeah, you were a huge help in what I was going through back then. So I'm really keen to catch up with where you're at right now. Um,
Yeah.
you've released the new book Shine, and it
Mhm.
it talks about finding entrepreneurial freedom. And I was really interested to start with that and understand what entrepreneurial freedom means to you.
Yeah. I think that's an appropriate question given the name of your podcast, The Freedom Experience.
Yeah. It came from seeing folks kind of hitting this plateau or getting stuck, and how they overcome that and how they sort of find their way through that. And I think that has a lot to do with the work you're doing. But I was really
Yeah.
interested in how you think about that.
Yeah. Well, it's an inner journey. And that's what we write about in the book. I have a co-author on the book named Gino Wickman. And so what does it mean to me? It means continuing to do the inner work so I can get closer to my true self more frequently, which will help guide me in all my decisions. So I make more decisions from a place of love and less decisions from a place of fear.
What is we talk you talk about moving closer to your true self. For the folks who are listening, what does that true self mean?
Well, it's defined many different ways by many different people over thousands of years. But once you know it, we kind of created our own definition for the context in which we're presenting it. So I do have a cheat sheet. Okay. So I'm going to just glance down at it from time to time
Cool.
because it's not something I memorize. But at the end of the day, it's the authentic version of yourself. And it's unshaped by societal expectations, professional roles, and social masks. So, what I mean by that when I say that, so, as we make our way through this human experience, we are impacted by different things that happen in our lives, and they inform both the way we think and the way we feel in our body. And so it's shaped over time. Hopefully that makes sense. And your true self is unshaped. So you might imagine a baby. And
Yeah.
when's the last time you held a baby?
Oh, it's been a while ago. I think it was
Not a while,
probably
right?
my niece when she was really
Yeah.
little.
What's it like to hold a baby?
Yeah, it's like there's a kind of magic to it, I guess.
Yeah,
They,
magic.
yeah, I think back to my daughter and holding her the first time and thinking, this is brand new. There's this magical thing to it, and how do I help shape her, I suppose. But yeah,
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
com-
I love that you use the word magical. Isn't
yeah,
that interesting? And when we're holding a baby, it's like we feel a certain energy. It feels so pure. It
yeah,
feels so non-judgmental. Everything about it just feels perfect. That's why we love holding babies because they remind us of our true self, because that baby is their true self at that moment, because the world hasn't really gotten a hold of that baby yet. Now, it makes it sound like everything I'm saying makes it sound like, well, once the world gets a hold of you, you're ruined, which
yeah,
isn't the case, which isn't the case. But we do have things like an ego. And oftentimes we bury the impact of certain life events behind our ego. We wear a suit of armor. We might be wrapped up in a cocoon, for lack of a better way of saying it. And our ego is trying to protect us from harm, what it believes to be harm. And that might mean people getting to really know us at the deepest of levels, the things that we fear. We oftentimes don't want people to, especially in leadership roles, to recognize that we're actually afraid right now.
yeah.
There's some really challenging things, and I'm trying to be the calm in the storm, but inside it's churning up, and I am afraid for everything. I'm afraid that we'll lose our biggest client. I'm afraid that we're going to have to let people go from the company. I'm afraid that, the whole company might go bankrupt. I mean, you could go down rabbit holes, but your true self it doesn't waver in those moments. And your true self is also not afraid to allow the world to see how you really feel. And so these are examples that we like to use and share when we're talking about what the true self means.
I love the way you describe that, because I've often felt that, is there something wrong with me? I don't feel like I come with any kind of childhood trauma or any kind of real trauma. But the way you've just articulated it at the moment is those things that we're kind of, the ego and the fear is holding on to, and we're too scared to share with somebody else. And also, I've been feeling recently like, am I kind of a member of a very small club of people who didn't go through any kind of childhood trauma? Is there something wrong with me, perhaps?
No. Let me build on that. You're not the first person to say that to me. So I should start a club for you all. I'm just kidding. But no, you've still been shaped. So I'll give you an example. And it's not about you. I'm just going to share an idea that the listeners can kind of reflect on. Maybe it resonates. Let's say that a person grows up in an incredibly loving home. And let's say within that home, their parents are very successful on to the outer world. Maybe they've had successful careers. And so that child growing up in that home, in that loving home, also begins to get a sense that there's an expectation in life potentially around being successful professionally. And so that carries through as they go through their schooling, and maybe there's a bit of an expectation that they are an excellent student. And so there now is this underlying pressure that's going on that they're not even really aware of, because the parents aren't sitting them down and saying, you better get all A's. You better become a doctor. You better become a very successful entrepreneur. They're not doing that. It's just what the child is witnessing and the world that they've been brought into. And so then as they embark into their young adulthood, say they're getting into their 20s and it's time for them to start becoming self-sufficient, they may have underlying anxiety around being able to meet the standards that they've witnessed in their parents. And their parents didn't do anything specific to create that other than just living their lives.
Yeah.
And so there's an example that isn't traumatic. You might call it a paper cut. That's how some people refer to it. But yet it carries through with this person's life. And as a result, they start they start carrying this suit of armor, and oftentimes want to show the world, more specifically their parents, that they can be as successful as them, if not even more so. And that drives them sometimes down the wrong paths in life, because they're trying to unknowingly please other people instead of paying more close attention to what matters most to their soul, to their true self. Because who knows, maybe they would have just been a great teacher, and there ain't nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, not a doctor or a lawyer or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, what an amazing thing to be able to be a teacher, and how impactful that is. But maybe that wasn't something that they felt was going to meet the standards that they understood growing up.
And for entrepreneurs who, we're naturally, I think, people who are very gritty, feel like we're alone up at the top there. We don't want to share any of this stuff. Is that just kind of making the whole situation worse? Where we don't open up and share, and maybe particularly in men as well.
Yeah. So what does it feel like when you carry around a secret and you're to the outside world, it seems like everything's wonderful, but inside you're walking around with stuff, you know? And then what happens when you have an opportunity for, and however it comes about, you're able to share what was inside? It feels like a release.
Yeah, like a
It
weight coming
feels,
off. Like,
yeah, weight
yeah,
off the shoulders. Exactly.
yes,
Yeah. So to answer your question, why do people keep all this inside? Because they have their suit of armor up.
yeah,
They don't want the outside world to know that they're not as successful, whatever that means, by the way. We can have a whole nother discussion about that, as they've made themselves seem to be with their, let's just use entrepreneurs, with their amazing company.
So outside we
And
look super successful, but on the
yeah,
inside, there's a whole different experience going on. There's
it's a whole different thing
a
going
whole
on in
different thing
there.
going on.
And nobody knows it but you. And you're
Yeah,
walking around with this each and every day, and you feel like you're living a lie because in
yeah.
some ways you are.
So, I mean, I took the 10 disciplines, so went through the 10 disciplines questionnaire, and I came out at about a 62. And I think I was saying to you before we started, most entrepreneurs I talk to we can't plan for the next 3 months, let alone the next 3 years. How do we help them overcome this challenge between the sort of inner and outer worlds, or inner and outer self?
Yeah. Okay. So what you took is called the true self assessment.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that and sharing, you know, getting us going with, kind of where you landed. So, first, you and I know somebody by the name of Jack Stack well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And he has a saying, you gotta wanna.
Yeah.
So
I love
first things
it.
first, you gotta wanna, right? Same thing. He has it in a different context, but I like using it because I think it applies here. So you gotta wanna. So maybe taking the true self-assessment is a person dipping their toe into seeing if they wanna. Okay, so let's go to your question about planning. In the 10 disciplines, discipline number 1 is 10-year thinking. It's shifting your mindset from short-term thinking to thinking in 10-year timeframes. So when you're able to do that, shifting your mindset, time slows down because you realize there's no rush.
Yeah.
We have put on ourselves this idea that we must do everything now. I must have it now. But if you want to build a company that's going to be around for a while and be a great company with great people, then you got time. And so you can begin to shift your mindset. Now, it's helpful, and a lot of companies do this, and you may help them doing this, is where do you want to be in 10 years? So, we help people. One of the things we do in our program is help people create their 10-year thinking vision. So, what does that mean? It could be one sentence like, I want a deep and loving relationship with my spouse and kids. Okay, that's great. So 10 years from now, you want that. So let's break it down. With that in mind, what can I do today to move the needle on making sure that I have that kind of relationship in 10 years? Well, I can treat my wife, in my case, I could treat my wife and kids with absolute pure love, never judge them, always accept them fully for who they are. And they'll feel that energy from me. And that's going to help me in 10 years. Now, I'm going to fall off the wagon. One day
Yeah.
I'm
As
not
we
going to
do.
get enough sleep. Yeah, one day I'm not going to get enough sleep and I'm going to say something stupid. I'm going to have a short fuse or something. Okay, that happens. We're human. But because I'm clear about 10-year thinking and my 10-year thinking vision, I can pause and say, hold on, that doesn't work. And I can either reconcile that inside of myself and say, do better tomorrow, or I might even share with the person that I had a short fuse with, how I feel bad about it. And that doesn't align with what I want for us in the future, and keep chipping away at that, because this is the long game. And so 10-year thinking is really critical, not just in our personal lives, but also in business. It really helps us weather storms. If we're really clear about where we're going and why we're doing it, it helps us navigate. We talk about the 10-year business cycle.
Yeah.
And you can go back
Yeah.
in history. Yeah, you can go back in history. In a 10-year cycle, you're going to have 2 great years. You're going to have 6 really decent years. And you're going to have 2 years that they're going to be so bad they could put you out of business. Okay. So what do you got to do? You just have to be ready for that. You have to plan accordingly. You have to manage your cash and do all the practical things. So when a pandemic comes, you're well positioned to weather that and come out stronger on the other side. And that has to do with, how do you create a culture of people that when things aren't good, they step up to the plate big time? And how do you ensure that you have enough cash to weather a year of horrible sales and virtually no profit, or maybe even losses? Well, some people get overwhelmed, and I say, it's okay. You got 10 years. So start chipping away at that right now. What can you do? What are the small things you can do now to get yourself in that position? Because it isn't going to happen overnight, and that's okay, because you're thinking in 10-year timeframes.
So what was the thing? You should have planted that oak tree 10 years ago, but if you haven't, the time to do it is right now.
Well, you can learn from that lesson. That's great. But don't dwell on it, because the past is the past, and you can't change the past. And the future isn't here yet. There's nothing you could do. So what do you really have? Like right now, all I have is this present moment speaking with you. So if my heart stopped in the middle of our conversation, I'm grateful that you were the last person that I had a chance to talk to, because we're having a meaningful conversation. What could be better?
that just sent a whole lot of warmth through me as well. Thank you. I'm very grateful as well, Rob. Yeah. But yeah, I get where you're coming from, but just actually being in the moment, having this conversation and being fully engaged and present in the conversation we're having.
Yeah. Isn't this what life's all about?
And the way, yeah.
No, please go ahead.
The way you get to that 10-year might be very messy and kind of all over the place, but it's being clear on that's where we headed in the next 10 years.
Let's talk about that. I love that you said messy. What's messy? See, there's no messy. There's no such thing as messy. Business is hard.
Not messy.
Life is hard.
It's hard.
That's just, it's everybody.
Yeah.
It's all, if you want to call it messy, I think it's beautiful, because it's every step of the way we're learning. We're growing.
Go on journeys and growing. Yeah.
Exactly. So I always like to, I was speaking with somebody recently, and they were kind of bummed out because they had 2 business ventures that hadn't gone well. And then they were in this place now where they were very excited, and they were kind of resetting and creating something new and had a lot of energy around it. And they kept talking about, this person kept talking about how if they only would have done this, or this in the past, these other things wouldn't have happened. And I wanted to reframe, and during our discussion, I worked to help that person reframe this, because this person was going down a path, and that path took this person in different directions, which got him to a different path, which took him on different directions, which got him to where he is at this moment, which he wouldn't be where he is at this moment without all those experiences. So how can that be messy or failure? That's success.
Yeah.
Because honestly, he's doing what he was meant to do at this moment. He set himself up perfectly for it. And it's beautiful. There was no failure in any of it. It was all exactly as it should be.
Where he should be right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Where he should be right now. How many of us or yourself have ended up someplace for some reason through a set of circumstances that we could have never perfectly mapped out?
Yeah, it's
A
only when you
lot.
look back at the breadcrumbs, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Thank you. Breadcrumbs is so perfect.
Yeah.
Because at the time you're like, what am I doing? What's this all about? And then all of a sudden it connects and you're like, huh, I wouldn't be here in this situation if it hadn't been for that, this, and this, and this. And wow, thank goodness. Sometimes I felt like I was in a dark place when that was all going on, but now it sure seems light. You don't have to be in the dark place if you are your true self and you trust what is happening in the present moment is exactly what's supposed to be happening. You just don't like the way what's happening. That's your problem to fix. That's where you have to go inside and ask yourself why this moment isn't good enough for you. What isn't good enough about it for you? And hey, we go through some really crappy stuff in our lives. I mean, some of it, if you put scales on it, some of it takes on greater weight than others. So I'm not trying to minimize difficult times, but we all have them. And it's important for us to understand that that's part of that. What's happening is part of what's supposed to happen in that moment, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Because we can't control it. There's nothing we can do to control it.
So if you reflect on your journey as an entrepreneur and what times that you've been through, you started a business with your best friend, you built up that business. I presume you got to a point when you started to implement EOS that there were things going on in the business that you wanted to change and you wanted to sort of grow the business. And then you get to a point where you're going through an exit and you sell the business and then you buy it back. I'm curious, I guess, how is your true self, or the true self that this journey that you're on is a journey that never really ends. So do you ever really find your true self? And I'm kind of trying to connect that back to entrepreneurship, I guess, but starting with that baby, that fresh sheet of paper, that magical moment, you're kind of influenced through your life. But was there a point in your life and in running these businesses and imageOne where you felt something's not right, something's got to change here? And
Yes.
when was that moment?
I don't know the exact moment, but there were a lot of moments where I had a lot of messages that I ignored. So, to your kind of how you queued it up there. My best friend and I started the business. That was a dream come true until we were actually having to run a business.
And that relationship with Joel is really important to you. He's your best friend, you talk about him.
He's my brother from another mother.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, running a business had a whole new dynamic, and it stressed the relationship to the maximum. And my true self didn't want that. I just wanted my best friend back. I didn't want my best friends to be my business partner anymore. It was too hard for me.
Was that very early on in the journey, or was that before you sell the first time?
Now, I'm more aware of messages nowadays than I was when I was in my 20s. So in my 20s, I just had a resilience around, let's figure this out.
Okay.
Because we're business partners. And then there was some practical matters. We had built a business that was creating income. I had a family. I wanted to support that family. We had built the company to a certain point where, there was some success. And, one of the things that was really helpful was when we implemented EOS. So that was helpful. That was early on. And that got us kind of a little bit more clear about some things, or a lot bit more clear about a lot of things, I really should say.
Where
And then
was
when we,
your, I was
yeah,
going
go
to say,
ahead.
when you implement into EOS, where was your head in terms of things like core values and tenure thinking? Was that, if I recall, you kind of pushed against core values and things
Totally.
like that originally, or
Yeah. When Gino came in and the first exercise we were doing was the core values exercise, I had come to the meeting with a list. I must have had 25 issues, and he wanted us to do core values, and I wanted to do issues first and then do core values. And he said, give me some blind faith. And we did. And that's what we did. And that was I'm glad I agreed to that. And I'm glad that he, I'm grateful to him for the way he approached that with us. And now obviously core values, like that's a number one.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that kind of gives you a sense of, I just felt like I was in a storm and I needed to reduce my anxiety by trying to get through some of these issues, when the biggest issue was we didn't even understand who we were as a company.
as a company, not just
Yeah.
as
And
individuals. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. As a company, who were we? And getting those values made that really clear. And of course, going through that exercise, and I'm sure many of your listeners, once you do that, you start to notice the people who are part of your company. There's some number of them that they just actually aren't that.
yeah,
And they've been holding the company back. And then you have to go through that process of making decisions around whether those people can change their ways, or if you have to, part ways. So, but okay, so let me continue on.
yeah. Sorry.
Uh, no, that's okay. That was a great question. Once we got clear about that and the company really was starting to click on all cylinders, when we sold, one of the things I was excited about that was that we didn't have that partnership challenge anymore. So 18 months later, though, we were given this opportunity to have the company back. So we got back into it. But in the
Did you?
meantime, in
Did
between, we
you?
were trying to figure out, like, how can we do this better together, or can we?
Was
You
that
know.
decision to buy the company back driven by ego and fear, or did it come out of love? Where were you at that point?
So I think that seemed like a good business decision, because
Okay,
they paid us a lot of money and then they gave it back to us. And it was almost like, how could you not do this?
this
This
is a
doesn't even
no-brainer.
seem to make practical sense.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what we
Okay.
did. Yeah. So, but, when I look at that decision, because we actually did think a little bit, not too long, but we did think, do we really want to do this? But see, Small Giants, that book landed on my desk and it inspired me and it inspired Joel. So, that's where we said to ourselves, wow, there's a community like this in the world. And there are companies that can operate in a way that feels more aligned with who we are as people. And so that was more of an opening to come to become closer to our true selves as we led a business. Because before that, we weren't leading that way. It was
Okay.
more command and
Yeah.
control, And so then we were able to develop and cultivate a stronger culture, which, we're proud of, like many of those in the Small Giants community. We're proud of what we ultimately created. As we went along the journey, I started to say to Joel, I don't know how much gas I have left in my tank to do this and do it with you. We really need somebody who can, I felt we needed somebody who could run the company. Joel felt differently, but he was open to it because he knew how much pain I was in.
Okay.
But I
And
wanted to be mindful about it. I didn't want to like jump in and try to solve the problem tomorrow. I knew that us to find somebody that the two of us just both felt so good about, and that we knew could take what we had built and appreciate it. Not just appreciate it for himself, but appreciate it, meaning level it up, you know, in a way that we couldn't do. I felt we had hit the ceiling. Later, Joel began to agree with me, but he wasn't quite where I was as soon as I was there. And then we found somebody, and there's a whole story around that that isn't worth telling right now, but there's a whole, you know, serendipitous story around that. And that was really helpful. And he came in, and we quickly realized how talented that person was. And then we created a succession plan, and now he's running the company as CEO. And Joel's off doing something very meaningful, as am I, that is
Yeah.
more aligned with our true selves. Back to this whole story of
Yes.
successes and failures and messy and this and that, all those little points along the journey put us right where we sit today. Had we not had those points, we wouldn't have done any of it. We wouldn't be sitting where we are today.
So you
And so it's
guys
all perfectly placed.
placed. Did you? I mean, it sounds like Joel had a bit of work to shed a bit of armor, or in bringing in a new CEO, and this whole journey has been about moving toward true selves. But were
Right.
you folks kind of consciously thinking about that, or how did these ideas evolve over time? Thinking about being your true self and finding your true self.
You know, for me, it really started when I took on a meditation practice, which has been good for me. I'm not saying that's good for everybody, but it's been very useful for me. And I did write a book called Do Nothing, which,
Yep.
you know, gives people some things to think about how this relates to business. But what I noticed is through that meditation practice and some extended time in silence that I had taken, I started to open up to the world in a different way. And I started to notice my intuition was heightened. And so I had more of a knowingness around the idea that I wasn't going to be the right person to run this company. And I also knew Joel wasn't the right person, which was hard to tell him that because, first of all, what do I know? And he doesn't need to agree with me. And if you asked anybody in the company, none of them would have probably said that Joel was the wrong person, or maybe even that I was the wrong person. I just knew inside that we weren't going to take the company to the company's vision. We just weren't going to. And so that helped, that experience in meditation and this practice I have really helped bring out that intuition more strongly. And, you know, over time, I think I know Joel, he began to see it very clearly as well. And, you know, that's where we decided to more formally put into place the succession plan. So everybody in the company knew what was going to happen, and that Joel and I were going to exit out, and that they wouldn't be seeing us around anymore.
And you, how do you view imageOne now? Is it's an investment? You're an owner of the business, but you've kind of pulled yourself out and you're working on different startups or different projects at the moment.
Yeah.
But how have you thought about succession and the future of imageOne, so to speak?
Yeah. So you and I were speaking beforehand. We have a mutual friend named Ryan Tansom.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I had met Ryan, again, serendipitous, won't tell the story, not worth it, but you can just imagine how dots connect, breadcrumbs, the whole thing. Met him. And at the time, his partner named Pat Hobby.
Yeah.
And we engaged with him on some of the work that they were doing. And so Joel and I spent some time with them through their program, and that helped us really begin to look at the company in a different way, in that it was in one part at that time a job for which we made an income, and in another part, an investment of which it was an asset on our personal balance sheets
Yeah.
that had fluctuating value depending on
Depending on what it's
many
going
market circumstances,
on.
you know, and that was really helpful. So, how do I look at it now? I look at it like the latter. It is now an asset on my personal balance sheet, which fluctuates based on market conditions,
Yeah.
in which I do my best to, which I am on the board of and have some say with Joel and Josh on trying to keep that asset strong
Yeah.
and manage it through challenging times and, less challenging times. And there are other things that we have in mind, like how do we continue to have a successful company where Josh's ultimate goal, which comes from Joel and I, and he's wants this as well, is to sell it to the employees within the next 10 years. And you and I know enough about that through being around our community. But that has to work for Joel and I personally.
Yes.
Because that's part of an asset for us that we will monetize over time and liquidate so the company
Over time.
or so the customers can own it. And Ryan and Pat did a masterful job at really articulating that in a way that we could embrace. And Pat is actually our fractional CFO now. So he's right there in the mix with us each and every day. He's amazing. And Ryan is as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you're even, in terms of that, you've got that 10-year view on it again. You're thinking
Always.
this is a 10-year view that we're, and this is where we're going to land up, or where we aim to get. This is where we are right now. And we're in the present, and that's where we're kind of heading to, and we're enjoying the journey.
That's right. You got it.
So we're talking about, you got to want to do this. And I went through Hit 62, and I know there's some things that I learned a lot about meditation from you and your Do Nothing book. And I try to meditate regularly, and sometimes it goes off the rails a little bit. I'm pretty good at some of the things on those 10 disciplines, but not so much some of the other ones. Is it just a case you've got to want to do this, or is it some accountability, or how do we help CEOs to get in and kind of embrace some of those disciplines?
Well, you have to believe, especially driven people who are very busy and sometimes just don't have time to think about this kind of stuff because they keep themselves busy. What I believe is oftentimes subconsciously avoiding what's really going on in there. In there, I'm referring to your body. Your body's sending you messages all the time. So if it pings a person, sometimes the assessment is something that pings a person where they wake up for a second and they go, that's interesting. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is the person needs to say, I think that's worth investigating more. I want to understand this better. And the third thing is them probably saying to themselves, how's this going to make a difference for me?
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, I have a really good life. I don't have like a bunch of problems, or as you said earlier, traumas, things like this. I'm good.
But are we just kidding ourselves? Is it really all that good?
Yeah, right. So there's the question. And you took the words out of my mouth. And I believe most of us, if not all of us, we have things that are going on inside of us. We're staying busy to essentially avoid, our ego is keeping us busy, avoiding what's in there. And what we don't want to happen is we don't want to get to an age where we start thinking, oh boy, I something's not right. you know? And I don't have a lot of time left. And you see this in older people a lot, and they feel like time's running out because there's angst in there and they never really worked it out. And it doesn't need to be there. It doesn't need to be that way. And it doesn't need to be hard either, by the way. The true self-assessment's a great place to kind of guide you. Like, where should I start with all this? Because it's different for all people. Like you talked about meditation. So discipline number 4 is be still. So that does not mean you need to go meditate. We recommend 4 different ways of being still, but ultimately we encourage each person to find what works best for them. So the 4 ways that are most common that we find resonate with most people are prayer or meditation or journaling or contemplation or some combination of those 4. And what we encourage people to do is take 30 minutes per day and be still. That might look like, you know what? I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes and then I'm going to journal for 20. So there's 2 of those modalities that a person can try. Tomorrow, if they're religious or faith-based, they may say, I'm going to do a 5-minute prayer. Then I'm going to sit in contemplation for 15 minutes. Then I'm going to journal for 10 minutes. Okay, so you can see how you can kind of create the thing that works best. We aren't giving you a prescription.
Don't go off and meditate every morning for 30 minutes and in the evening for be still.
We're all unique, but one thing we all need is to be still. We have to let our minds and our bodies settle. We have to let our souls, our true self, catch up. But we're just so busy with life that sometimes when we sit down to do that type of thing, the ongoing to-do list and all the big stories and dramas that we got going on in our lives get stirred up, and it's painful. And that's why we say, you know what, I can't do this. I got things to do. I'm busy. This makes no sense. What am I doing here? Why am I doing this? It's the reason you're doing this and the reason you want to settle all of this. It's like the jar with sand and water, and there's a cap on the jar. You shake it up and the sand's stirring around. You can't see through the jar. You're not clear. We want you to be clear. When you are clear, you start making your decisions from love and not fear. And that can shake up your life a little. That probably is a little strong. Like, I don't want to scare everybody, but it can. It will say, I'll give you an example. I was working with, I have a client I was working with, and she said, going through this process of the 10 disciplines and beginning to implement being still in my life every day for 30 minutes, I realized I was meeting my friends at a bar once a month after work. And I started to ask myself, why am I doing that? Why am I taking time away from my family with these people that I actually don't even feel that connected with anymore? Like, we have our old times together and we talk a lot about those and there's a lot of laughs. But in terms of like the kind of relationships she wanted moving forward, it wasn't aligned anymore. And then one day she called me and she said, I got the email about where we were meeting and I told the group I'm not coming anymore. And she was really excited. But you see what I'm saying is these little things that where you start to wake up and say, what am I doing that for? It can be as simple as that. And same thing in business. What if in business we're going along and we're trying to build this empire? And then all of a sudden we get still and we start to feel in our body like some contraction. And then one day we say to ourselves, oh my God, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I actually don't want to build an empire. I kind of like a smaller, more manageable company, and I kind of have a nice lifestyle. What am I driving so hard for all this? You start to ask yourself these questions. What am I doing all that for?
Yeah.
And you start to uncover what that reason is. Well, I'm trying to prove something to somebody else, maybe even try to prove something to myself that I don't need to prove anything to myself. You have nothing to prove to yourself, by the way. You don't have to prove to the world or to anybody else that you're enough. You already are enough. You are enough. It's important to know that. Whatever it is you're doing, you are enough. Nobody cares what you're doing. You care more than anybody else.
You care more than anybody else, and it kind of ties back to your definition of success that you were talking about earlier, without going into that too much. But what is that definition of success? And you're doing it up. When you reflect on the work you've done, what's the most significant change that you've noticed in your life, having adopted the 10 disciplines?
Letting go. Letting go. I could still be running imageOne. I could be totally in the mix with that. I had to let go of my identity. Rob, the imageOne guy, the culture, the this, the that, you and I are in Small Giants, imageOne, Small Giant, this, that, that's all identity. It's letting go of that. Yeah. And in the work I'm doing now, I'm thinking about that all the time. What's bringing me joy, truly? And by the way, what if this doesn't work out? That's okay. I say that with such peace, because this is a startup. And we're 4 years into it, And
it's tough.
It's
hard. Not easy starting again. You've been through this, 30 years? And you're back to the beginning.
Right. I ran imageOne for 33 years. And then I do a startup. And, we're proud of, just like imageOne, we're proud of what we're doing. It's still hard. It's still got all the but what I know about myself is, at the end of the day, I can't run it and I don't want to. So I know in this world, I'm a simplifier. I can take concepts and I can help people understand that to them and figure out ways to teach it to them. But am I going to build an empire with the 10 disciplines company? No, but maybe somebody else will, or maybe we won't have a company. And I'm okay with however that shakes out, or anything in between.
Yeah. You're right.
Because what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to operate in the present moment. I'm 10-year thinking. I see what kind of impact that we want to make. I see that, but I'm not going to sell my soul to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to always check in. And when anything feels out of alignment, I will shift it. So one of the disciplines is know your 100%. That is taking the time to truly understand the perfect number of hours per week and weeks per year that you will bring your value to the world. For some people, that's 20 hours, and for others, it's 80 per week.
I love that, reading that as well. What's the 100%? And I hadn't thought about that before.
What's your 100%?
Yeah.
And so how does the 10 disciplines show up in my life? I'm constantly paying attention to what's my 100%. I've been in business a long time. I put maximum effort into everything I do. I'm also getting older. I also have other things I'm interested in. So my 100% has changed over time. And how I structure my day has changed over time. I can't do more than 4 hours of meetings per week. Per day. And I can't really work more than 7 hours a day. I can push myself, but I won't, because that's when I feel most clear.
Yeah.
And where I feel like I have the most energy. And those things I'm doing, like speaking with you, which is such an absolute gift. I can't even tell you. to be able to spend time with you
Thank you,
today.
Robert.
But just
Yeah.
not just
And
as a friend,
yeah,
but to have you being so generous to provide a platform to even have this kind of conversation. It's like you got to pitch yourself. These are the conversations that I want to have during my week, and when I'm not having them, I'm out of alignment. And I know that, and I change that. And so there's one of the ways that the 10 disciplines shows up. Now, how can I, but hey, Rob, how can you get the regular day-to-day stuff done? I mean, you can't always do everything you love. Yes, you can. Discipline number 7 is don't do $25 an hour work or any work that is below your pay grade. And so we need to use the term delegate and elevate. So when I have something that I'm doing that I know doesn't bring me joy, I'm not any good at it, or maybe I'm good at it, but it's, not in my
sucking your
sweet spot
energy
or all.
out and on you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sucking. Yeah. So I just need to delegate that. So that's all. So,
Yeah.
and some people say, well, the budget, I can't just pay everybody all the time. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You always can figure out a way if you're thinking in 10-year timeframes. If you know that by paying somebody $40 an hour to do something that you hate, that you can direct your energy into something that will be more valuable and will appreciate the services you offer, why wouldn't you do that? That's my
I
question. You
know.
don't trust yourself. You
So
are
it's coming
coming
from
from
fear
a
again.
place of fear. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
trust yourself, come from a place of love, and yeah,
That's
and
right.
make that change. I mean, just thinking about what you're saying it now. So, where does somebody start? What's the one step that the listeners can take right now to sort of take that first step?
Can I do a shameless plug?
Sure. Go for it. That's what.
Well, certainly you can buy the book Shine.
Yeah.
We have a self-study video series that you could go into and learn the 10 disciplines, which is the starting point of this work, because in our life, we need a strong foundation in place to do the inner work, the sort of that stuff that we were talking about earlier in our discussion. You can also join our 10 disciplines group coaching program, which is the thing that I recommend the most highly because it is live and highly interactive. And if you like to learn and be in community with like-minded people, this is what's going to get you accelerated to getting these 10 disciplines in your life more quickly. Now, why do I want them in my life more quickly? Because it's a strong foundation, as I said, and this foundation will help you solve any personal or professional issue you are having in your life. And we can literally go through and you can say what the issue is, and we can start pointing to how the disciplines interact with each other and help you solve it. Because as you know, in the work that you do, the issue that you think's the issue isn't actually the issue. It's 5 layers deep.
Yeah. You got to peel back those layers of the onion and keep going.
You got it.
To get to
You
it.
got
Yeah.
it. So
So
that's the best way to jump in and start doing that.
get a copy of the book. I read the book. Fantastic. Really enjoyed the read. And I think there are a lot of things I was aware of in the 10 disciplines, but it was so well laid out. And I wanted to get on and kind of do the quiz and figure out where I'm at. And then the next thing is get on and do the self-study, and then finally join the group.
You got it.
Fantastic.
Well, just to clarify for the listeners, you can go either route. You can do the self-study or do the group. You certainly can do both, but you don't have to do them in that order, is what I'm saying. You can just go right into the group coaching, which is the live version. And I think that's more impactful because most people aren't as disciplined as they just aren't as disciplined to go through a self-study on their own.
It's one of the most valuable things. I'm not sure how you kind of look at yourself as a coach or but having somebody to kind of guide you through the process
Totally.
and hold you accountable, and it
You
makes all the
got it.
difference, doesn't it? Yeah.
You got it. Totally.
So we'll put all your contact details into the show notes as well, Rob. Make
Thank
sure
you.
that folks know how to get to you, the book, all that kind of stuff. It's been
Thank you.
fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for opening it up to such a wonderful conversation.